Welcome back, everyone. Before we get into today's episode, we wanted to pull you all in close for some very exciting news. Next week, our podcast is officially rebranding. You are now part of the Gilmore and Green family. Debi and Sharilyn have loved growing with you over the past 5 months, so if things look a little different next week, don't worry, you're still in the right place. We'll be celebrating and showing off all the new colors, branding, logos on Instagram at Gilmore and Green this Friday. So in a couple of days, come on over, say hi on Instagram, share it with your friends. But for right now, let's get into today's episode on self-care, which, by the way, was life-changing for me.
Does doing things for yourself make you feel selfish or maybe even guilty? You're not alone. We hope today we can offer some new perspective and greater understanding about the importance of self-care and self-compassion. If you've been telling yourself that you can only rest when you've earned it, once everyone else is taken care of, then you'll take care of you. This episode is for you.
We don't believe self-care is just about bubble baths and spa days. It's actually a wide stewardship and the practice of intentional resets for the grounded well-being that we all long for. Today, we especially want to talk about the blocks to self-care. We all know how important it is, but there's things that stop that from happening, and that's what we're hoping to address today. So maybe you feel like you're running on empty or constantly depleted. If so, we really hope this episode will help you better respond to your needs with intention and respect while carrying the life you have, not adding to it. We hope you'll join us for an enlightening discussion on the topic of self-care.
Have you ever longed to be able to talk about values and morals or faith and spirituality without feeling judged? Hi, and welcome to our podcast, Mindful Moments, Insights to Empower the Soul. This podcast will empower you to embrace your true self. Hi, I'm Dr. Debi Gilmore.
And I'm Sharilyn Green. We are marriage and family therapists with such a passion for building healthy relationships and starting especially with the relationship that we have with ourselves.
Our topic today is about the importance of self-care and why this can be so hard, even though we all know how important it is. It's one of those things that makes complete sense in theory, but isn't always easy to do because real life happens, kids, work, marriage, stress, deadlines, challenges, or our voice inside our head that says, that's selfish. We hope to slow this all down today and to explore the reasons why self-care may be hard to practice, along with ways to increase moments of self-care so that you can give this to yourself and feel good about it.
I'm excited to slow this down, actually, because it's been helpful for me to think about and to do some study on why it is so difficult sometimes, why it blocks something we know we should all do. And so it's really been instructive for me. I'm excited to talk about this with you. So one thing right off the bat is that we know in many families and cultures and even faith traditions that rest is seen as a right or even a reward. And so if we haven't earned it, then guilt shows up. Not because we're necessarily doing something wrong. Of course we're not. But because it feels wrong. And that's so interesting to me. You know, I identify with that in my own family culture and faith culture, that sometimes it can feel like it's supposed to be a reward, not something that's good.
Yeah, can I jump in here? You talked about faith traditions. And as I think about this, if we really analyze what we're supposed to do as stewards of our bodies, we're supposed to take care of our bodies, and faith teaches that. In religious practices, it's important to take care of us. But then we have this contrasting, but that's selfish. You need to take care of others and be selfless. So what you're suggesting is that can be confusing, right? We get a different message than thinking about the stewardship over our amazing bodies.
Yeah, I love the word stewardship that you've used. I think that hits the nail on the head. I just love that and really causes a refocus for me or a reframe for me in this. So I love that word. Another reason that it could be difficult to feel okay about self-care is we have grown up in a world that praises staying busy, being strong, serving, and not needing much, right? I think that's very much part of our culture, that it looks important to be busy and there's rewards to that or accolades to that. And so that's another reason that we can feel self-care being blocked. We also grew up believing that it's the selfless thing, as you said, to do, to take care of others first. But the difficult part is that it often happens at the expense of our own well-being. And so, yeah, we see self-care as selfishness instead of the word you've used, a wise stewardship over our lives.
I'm glad we're emphasizing that. If you haven't heard it enough, we're going to continue to talk about the importance that it's essential. Now, I also want to remind everyone, all of our listeners, that this is based on solid research. We're not just talking about anecdotal evidence or I assume this is good. Let's just take care of ourselves because that's such a fun or right thing to do. No, this is based on evidence that it's important for our well-being. Another thing that we need to consider is sometimes self-care exposes our own personal needs that have been ignored, maybe unmet needs or even disowned needs. It can be a way to avoid the turmoil of realizing how overwhelmed, out of balance, tired, and burned out we really are. Self care can actually feel emotionally unsafe because it brings up hard emotions like shame, guilt, grief, or loneliness. And I'm going to say misapplied guilt because there's nothing to feel guilty about. But we might tell ourselves, I don't feel supported, or no one cares about me, or even lead to resentment. Why do I have to carry so much? So, taking care of others is sometimes easier than the work that's required to take care of ourselves. It can show up as, I love this word, altruistic attitude or altruism, when in fact it really is a way to avoid critical self care needs we have to maintain well being. So, self care can feel hard, not because we're failing, but because for so long we've told ourselves we have to be strong.
I love what you just said. It can feel like or look like altruism when in essence it can be ignoring our own self-care needs. So I love that you said that. It's also, possible that this lack of self-care just is quietly formed through habits, right? It begins by seeing someone who needs something, so you respond and you feel relief and approval. And so you repeat that. And eventually your brain can link self-worth to being needed. And so we can start to begin habits that override important needs like hunger, fatigue, sadness, stress, and overwhelm. It's just easy habitually for this to slowly, kind of carefully evolve in our lives if we're not careful.
This habit that forms, there's actually what they call the helper high. And these are chemicals that are released in our brains when we reach out and make someone else feel better, or we're serving. In the act of serving, oxytocin, serotonin, and epinephrine are released in our bodies, dopamine. So that's addictive. Yeah. And we might say, well, I feel so much better when I'm reaching out, taking care of someone else. You just now were talking about habits, Sherilyn, and it's true. It might be a damaging habit, but we don't want to lose the idea of service, but we want to balance and take care of ourselves too.
Yeah. Oh, I'm so glad you added all that. Really, what's happening in our bodies biologically with this helper's high. That's so interesting. So, along those lines, Debbie, when we stay in this kind of go mode that we can work ourselves into long enough, our nervous system can actually, like you say, be addicted to that and be wired to speed up to great productivity and control and problem solving. It becomes almost a way our nervous system learns now to just to live. And that can be hard to break. We can also have these little micro habits that develop that replace real self-care, like caffeine instead of sleep, or snacks instead of nourishing meals, scrolling instead of rest, pushing through instead of pausing, venting instead of processing, and fantasizing about breaks instead of just taking one. So we learn to develop these kind of short-term habits or micro habits that keep us from restoration. Another thing is that self-care doesn't actually always give an immediate payoff. And so you can even sometimes say to yourself, well, that didn't help. I'm going to go back to survival mode, where those chemicals, like you talked about, are readily accessible and give us that helper's high immediately. So another reason it can be hard to engage in self-care.
I thought it was interesting that just now you talked about we might think about this idea. It's a good idea, and in our minds say, I'll do this. I need to take care of me. So it becomes a list instead of an action. We fantasize about breaks instead of taking one. I love that you pointed that out. I think I am guilty of that often, thinking, well, I will eventually. But if, like, for example, if you don't put something on your calendar, you're not likely to do it. If it's on your calendar, you bump up against it and you say, oh, yes, I have this obligation. What if you put self-care on your calendar? So let's talk about some common blocks. Now, Sherilyn, you reminded me how important it is to say, what are those blocks? We were talking about that a few minutes before we started this podcast today. And so what we want to do is kind of review what might get in the way. We might tell ourselves others need us more. And that might be true, actually. But this could be confused as a special personal ability. I have a gift to be able to immerse in service. And I know so many people around me that are so good at serving others. And then I wonder, why are you so tired? Well, it's because they aren't taking care of themselves. It can feel flattering and even addictive, as you talked about just a few minutes ago, Sherilyn. We might tell ourselves, I just don't have time to focus on me. It's just not in my life of balance. So I'll eliminate that so that I have these other things I can do. The one that seems to be the most universal, though, is the sense that taking care of ourselves feels selfish. There's something about that, the me world that a few decades ago, it was the me generation. So maybe you don't know how to do self-care. That's another idea. Some people were raised in a home where self-care wasn't modeled or was actually discouraged. Or I'm thinking of mother who I admired so much because she could cook meals for others. And then I'd see the expressions when we deliver the meal and how joyful the family was. And I thought to myself, I want to do that when I grow up. Then I might assume that taking care of me or saying no is not okay. It's against our moral value. Another possible barrier is when you tell yourself it won't really help anyway, so why would I bother to take care of me? These beliefs may have protected you in some way in the past, but no longer serve you and who you want to become.
I love so much of what you said, Debbie, and I loved especially when you said we almost have to calendar it, right? Put it on the calendar. We're so careful about keeping our commitments to other people, and
Yeah.
we don't do that well with ourselves, keeping a commitment to ourselves. In fact, I think that's my favorite thing that you just said is, what about calendaring it, and making it happen? It's a way to really act, right, to make this happen.
That's right. Yeah.
Yeah, so we also love to just slow things down. And so we've talked about this habit loop that can happen as we get into these blocks of self-care. And so we just want to slow this down a little bit into looking at it as a little bit of a cycle. So a trigger comes along, right? And there's stress to that trigger, fatigue and overwhelm. Our automatic habit with that are, again, to do things like we push through, we start to caretake, we can numb, we can overwork. Those are sometimes how these habits form in these cycles and how we respond to the trigger. And then, of course, the reward is the short-term relief that you described so well, and a sense of control. It puts us back into feeling control. But the cost of this kind of cycle in our lives is a deeper depletion, resentment can build, and most of all, disconnection, especially with ourselves. And so I hope that's helpful to slow that down and look at it a little bit as a kind of an individual cycle that can happen inside of us when we hit a trigger in life that, ignites this pattern.
We are fans, Sherilyn, of patterns. That's what we do in our work. And humans are better when they recognize patterns in their life. Patterns can be really important where we create a good habit. So I want to review what you just talked about. This pattern or cycle begins with the trigger, the cue, the threat, life is stressful. Then you went to the habit that is a result of the trigger. We're now cast into what am I going to do to cope with this stress that I feel? Next, it's rewarding, the short-term relief of I can control the situation because it was distressing. This is what I usually do to cope. And so now I feel better. I'm in control. But the cost, that's the last part of this cycle that you talked about, just worse damage and a continuing. Our brains know the pattern. Our brain says, okay, this is how I'm going to do it. You don't need to worry about it. And all along, as we follow that pattern, we are becoming more and more depleted, more and more resentful of our world around us. So Thank you for pointing out that cycle, Sherilyn. It might be helpful as we're talking about this to spend a few minutes talking about what self-care is not. We've talked about why it's so important. We've talked about the blocks that get in the way, but self-care isn't more bubble baths or spending days at the spa or indulging in luxury. It doesn't mean checking out of responsibility or crossing off things that are important on our calendar or avoiding doing important things. In fact, it's not about doing more, and this is important. It's often about doing less. I paused because I need this one. This is the beginning of my, oh, therefore what? I am prone to do more because it just feels like now I'm being productive, but it's hard to do less. So self-care is not indulgent. It's not avoidant or selfish or something you have to earn, merit, or deserve. So what is self-care? Well, it's the practice. Self-care has to be something that we incorporate. And this is a term we use quite often with our clients. It's the practice of responding to your needs with intention and self-respect. Think about what that means. It does mean slowing down. It means recognizing what do I need and living intentionally with self-respect. Asking yourself, what do I really need right now? What's missing in my life? And what would help me stay regulated, present, or grounded so I can show up with strength, confidence, and integrity?
Debbie, I just love listening to you. It's such a good reframe, as to how our minds can see self-care to how it should see self-care. And I'm just loving the reframe of what we're talking about. And so I want to just continue on your thoughts with some important things to also consider, that self-care actually connects us to the highest integrity. We've used that word, but it's really the highest integrity within ourselves. Again, it can be perceived as an escape, but it's actually the most responsible path to living our best life. For example, when we are burned out, like we talked about, or feeling resentful, it's difficult, if not impossible, to feel empathy. And for us to be empathetic people, that's being our best selves, right? To show up with that empathy. And so we can see how a lack of self-care can block that ability.
Let's talk about that burnout, Sherilyn. We see it often in our profession. But we also, you and I have doctor husbands, and it is a tragedy when these doctors are so burned out. They work so hard and so long, so many hours of caregiving. And many times it's tragic loss, when they are so burned out. And there's a lot of research that has studied burnout in caregivers. So it's difficult for them to feel empathy, what happens, or us in our profession. So then therapists may stop feeling concern for their clients and resent having to sit with people who are in pain all the time. But that's not where they started. They started with a passion for helping others. But when their body is depleted, that burnout, the world loses this amazing person who could be helpful.
Well, I can't tell you what was going through my mind as you were talking about caretakers, like doctors. Again, I've seen my own husband and heard him talk about this. So it's really personal to me, actually, what you just said. And you're right, it's a loss to the world when these great caretakers no longer have the ability anymore to have empathy. We need that so much. And so that was really, really powerful when you just talked about all that. Thank you. When we're exhausted, Debbie, too, then our perspectives naturally narrow and fragment. We can't see the big picture well when we're exhausted. And so that's another loss when we aren't caring for ourselves. And then especially when our needs go unmet, resentment, I love this word, actually rages inside of us and grows. I think we've all experienced that feeling of resentment when it starts to rage inside of us. And it's a signal that something's off, right? That we're not taking care of ourselves. And of course, we can't show up as our best self when that happens. So when our lives don't honor the practice of healthy self-care, our resentment and our exhaustion, that starts to leak and spill over into others. And we become irritable, withdrawn, and sometimes even angry. And that's the last thing we want to be like. That's not who we are in our best lives. And so It's easy to start slowing this down and tracking it through and seeing what the result can be when we aren't wise stewards over ourselves. So, in other words, self-care is the very best way to support regulation and presence. I love that word presence. How can we be present in people's lives if our well-being isn't well, right? We just can't be present in the ways that we need to be. And so it's not necessarily about doing less for others. It's about not doing it from a place of depletion. And that's where that important word of balance comes in, right? We're not talking about never serving or never giving. We're talking about doing it in a balanced way that honors our own needs so that we can show up as our best selves.
Not about doing it, you said you used the word depletion, not about doing it from a place of depletion. How could we serve others and take care of others really well if we are depleted ourselves? I think that's another thing to really consider. It's prioritizing, making sure that we are prepared and strengthened so we can do all those things that bring us that feel good helper's high. So, in order to adjust and shift out of what you and I, Sherilyn, are going to call self neglect, okay, it's a powerful word. It's helpful to reframe your self care beliefs. So, think about it differently. Shift how your mind sees self care and self compassion. Self care, we used this word earlier, is stewardship, not selfishness. Self care is a way to honor your life, not escape it. Self-care is critical maintenance and not indulgence. Imagine if we didn't put oil in our car. It's not going to drive us down the street, right? And self-care is how you show up for others as your best self. It's maintenance of health and well-being, not repair. Self-care, then it's been too much neglect if we're now at the point where we have to be put in the ICU. So self-care is maturity, not weakness. Strong people place a high priority on restoration of self and preservation of self. Self-care isn't doing more, it's doing less. It means cultivating the ability to say no. And this is one we might want to sit on for a minute, Sherilyn. The ability to say no without apology or explanations. It means allowing and being okay with some things not being perfect. So can we, here's a great question, can you say no and put a period at the end of it and then not explain yourself or apologize after you say no? That's hard. I don't know if you have generated or cultivated the ability to do that, Sherilyn, but that's been a focus for me for a while. I don't want to disappoint someone. So saying no feels like I'm disappointing someone, right?
And I'll just add that when someone does do that with me, says no, my admiration for them actually, I don't actually feel disappointed, which, you do worry about. I actually feel admiration that someone has the wisdom, right, to be able to say no, not to have to explain it to me. And so as you're talking, I'm thinking we not necessarily disappoint people when we say no. For me, it engenders respect for someone when they tell me no.
That's right. And, when they do say no, it's also important for us, if we're going to care for others, if someone else says no, then to respect that and to say, wow, I'm sad that you can't, but wow, I want to be like you and to be able to have more self-discipline and not betray myself, because that's another form of self-neglect. Self-care is listening to your needs, not arguing with them. We have this voice inside of our head that says, you don't deserve that, or don't do that. Someone else will think you're selfish. Why do we place such high regard on what others think instead of evaluating and becoming more intentional for a greater good? Self-care is very healthy, but not disowning our needs. It's healthy and it's an essential boundary. It means acquiring the ability to say, I will not abandon or betray myself to meet mine or others' expectations. See, there's that horizontal validation that we don't want to go to. This is self-respect in action. So self-care is giving yourself permission to be human, permission to disappoint others at times, and permission to rest.
Oh, I just love all that. As we just continue to talk about this, Debbie, we wanted to talk about even just some micro self-care ideas now. It isn't one just big thing we do occasionally. Sometimes we think that's the way it is, some big, yeah, like you say, spa day or vacation or something, but it's actually 100 small ways that we stop abandoning ourselves. And we've determined that there's actually some categories to this, right? That are helpful, even again, in our intention about how we do this. So when we need to take care of ourselves physically, we can do some simple micro things like this, just taking 3 slow breaths when needed. Just something that simple, drinking a full glass of water, that's self-care, right? Eating something with protein in it, stepping outside for fresh air and daylight for 2 minutes, washing your face with warm water, taking a power nap, or going for a walk.
Did you notice
Yeah.
none of these cost money? I'm
Yeah.
just looking at that. I'm thinking, wait, this is free for our taking. We can claim this at any time. But how many times have we taken a sip of water, set the thing down, and at the end of the day, we go, wait, whose bottle of water is that?
Yeah, exactly. It doesn't cost anything, but it doesn't take a lot of time either. Everything we just said just takes just a minute.
Yeah.
I'm struck by how simple and costless and timeless these can be. So, some ideas for emotional self-care: to just slow down and name what you're feeling. We have emotions hitting us all day long. And so to take the time to take care of yourself in this emotion, slow down, say, this is what I'm feeling, and that actually makes sense for what's happening to me right now. That can be a beautiful way to take care of yourself. To be able to say to yourself, what do I need right now? You mentioned that earlier. We don't ask ourselves a lot, but to be intentional throughout the day and slow down again and just say to yourself, what is it I need right now? We don't do that a lot, do we? We get so busy.
Yeah.
To be able to respond to our sometimes inner critical thoughts or the way that we see ourselves with kindness, to say, I'm learning right now, or I'm human, and to give us our own self-compassion when needed. And then finally, we'll always talk about the importance of therapy, right? To engage in a therapy session if you need, more intense emotional processing. That's such a form of self-care. And another great one, and you're so good at this, Debbie, journaling. That's something I really admire about you. You journal a lot. And another really low-cost way to take care of yourself emotionally. But do you want to say something about
Yes, I do. I want to say I journal for selfish reasons because I know when I review it later, it will bring me a rush of memories, that amazing, rich moment that was so rich at that time. And maybe even I'll learn something else about that experience. I love that. But there's also something else you and I do, and I know you've had this happen, where you ask a client sitting across from you, what do you need right now? And they are struck with this question like, wait, no one usually asks me that. I haven't thought about it. And what if we gave ourselves that gift of just saying, what do I need right now? My husband asked me that the other day. He said, what do you need? And I was stunned by the question, didn't have an answer, thought about it, and the next day gave him the answer. So it was just such a striking moment. So glad you brought up journaling, Sherilyn. So glad you brought up the importance of therapy. And this can be a form of therapy we offer ourselves. Let's transition to talking about relational self-care. So here's an idea. Ask your loved one for one specific need. For example, can you hold me for a minute? Have you ever done that? It's a pretty vulnerable ask, really. Will you hold me for a minute? It means saying something like, let me get back to you before committing to your request. I'd like to think about it before I agree to take this on. Now, think about how that happens in the moment someone's asking you for a monumental thing that they want your help with. We might be tempted to say, sure, I can do that. And then we regret and feel guilty that we want to get out of it later. So, what if you said, let me get back to you? The most amazing people in my life, when I have asked them for something and they say this, I'm thinking, that is wise. I need to start doing that. Or take a brief walk, invite a friend to join you for lunch. I've been doing that more, and my life is richer because of that. Pausing in the middle of your day to sit across food and really be richly fed in my soul, my spirit. Become more aware of those moments when you need help. Ask for it. Oh, that's another hard one, right? And then, oh, sorry, did you want to say
No,
something
I
about
just feel
that?
like we're both choking almost to say that.
It is hard. And so right now, you and I are just acknowledging and validating, normalizing that this is difficult. Another thing, when repair in a relationship is needed, in your most important relationships, you know what that's like. You have an ache in your heart, a tightness in your chest. Pause to have a soft repair conversation. Now, we see miracles happen all the time when we're working with couples. We slow them down long enough to say, let me help you repair. And then our counsel to them is when it hurts or stings, repair swiftly so that the sting doesn't grow into a bigger, more painful experience and it becomes harder to repair. Now, this is something, Sharilyn, you and I love talking about spiritual self care. This means think about what brings you a deeper sense of spirituality and spiritual connection, whatever that means to you. You might consider opening a book of scriptures, just let it open and read one verse randomly. Sit with it for a minute and ponder on how does that passage relate to me? Is there an answer in that passage for my life right now? Or maybe sit in silence and the calm of meditation. I like to say pondering, paying attention to your surroundings, noticing smells, sounds, and sensations for a few minutes. The thing we do know, Sharilyn, you may want to talk about this for a minute, is if we're in hyperspeed, how can we connect spiritually? It's really difficult to do that unless we slow down, soften the moment, and listen, right?
I was just going to add, I was struck, I've never forgotten this. Someone I really admire spiritually as a young mother who was so busy with life, right? She talked about putting her scriptures on her washing machine or her counter. And as she was going back and forth with it all, reading one verse and then just thinking about that. And I saw the power of that micro habit in her life and the spiritual self-care it brought her. And so as you talked about that, I really admired and thought about that a lot in someone that I've seen.
I love this. And I have to admit, if someone gets to know me very well, they learn that I have a passion for spiritual connection. That's why I love our work, because I think emotional connection is spiritual connection. So, as we're talking about this self care related to spirituality, this is probably the number one thing in my world that I reach to find that peace. And it really is rejuvenating, re energizing. And here's another way to incorporate that spirituality and self care: practice gratitude. Think about the good things in your life. We might be so focused on what's not going well. Think of 3 things that you consider gifts in your life, simple gifts. Ponder on what you're grateful for, and that will bring you that spirituality and that connection in the moment. Music. Oh, I'm a fan. I am a musician, and I have been known to sit down and quietly play on my piano, and that re-energizes me. It's the most beautiful experience. It's a powerful way to promote the spirit. Listen to a spiritual hymn or a peaceful song that brings joy to your soul. I listened to an African spiritual, I don't know what it was called, yesterday, and it rolls around in my soul, and it's almost irreverent in a way, but I loved that moment of just listening to it and how it fed me. Finally, find a quiet place and go ahead and lay down. Release all the muscles in your body and tension. Give yourself the gift of rest without earning it. Now, I know I've spent a lot of time on this, Sherilyn. I'm sorry, but this one's important to me.
No, I was just going to say, Debbie, I know how important this is to you, and I've loved listening to you. There's a spirit about you as you talk about this because I know it's authentic in you and genuine. And I do know you well enough to know how important this is to you and to me as well. And so we are really grateful that we could talk about spiritual restoration, right? Spiritual things that bring us that self-care in ways that are so powerful. We are such believers in that. I'm just going to end this little part up with some just practical ideas as we look at these in categories of things that we can do that restore us. So tidying up a surface for 5 minutes. I know that my go-to when I need to just kind of reset or restore is to do exactly that, to put my environment in order, and to just do something like that for 5 minutes can really help. To set a timer and do one small annoying task that you've avoided. Isn't that the worst feeling when there's something that you're dreading and that hangs over you and it's heavy and it just detracts from the joy in life? And so to take care of that, right? And get that off your plate so that you can truly rest in the ways that we need. To meal plan. That's a simple thing to do too, so that we're giving our body the nourishing food that we need. Give your future self a gift by laying out clothes at night, packing your bag, filling your water bottle in advance. It's a way to say, I care about you tomorrow or in the morning, I'm looking out for you. I'm caring for the future you. And that feels so good, doesn't it? You feel like you're winning at life instead of losing at life when you do that. And then just to create a wet rest week or a day just because. No reason, no, nothing, doesn't matter why, to just do it, to give yourself that gift.
Yeah, that's a big ask, isn't it? To just say, oh, I'm going to take this week. But really, I remember something Stephen Covey taught about vacation. He said, you really need an extended period. It takes 1 week to unwind and the next week to really relax. Now, that's a luxury that many people do not have. But if you select a staycation week and just take that rest, or if we're forced down because we're in the hospital or we're sick, I mean, I really do have moments where I relish it. I'm thinking, well, I can't do anything and I'm just going to enjoy this as much as I can. But the other one that you talked about was laying out your clothes and packing a bag, getting ready for the next day. The chaos of the morning, I have done that before, and it is so nice to not give it a thought that rush morning and just say, oh, I already know what I'm going to do, what I'm going to wear. My lunch is ready or my water bottle is ready. Okay, so this has been a lot. We probably ought to tie a bow on all this. So I just want to conclude this whole discussion about self-care. If it feels hard to you, please know that you're not failing. You are human. And for many of us humans, learning self-care isn't natural. It has to be learned. It has to be cultivated and intentional. So we hope that the things that we've talked about today in this podcast have helped bring you a new perspective and helped you maybe shift some of your beliefs about self-care to a new understanding of how essential it really is. We hope that this has helped you to encourage you to choose just one small way to give yourself greater care. And we hope you can ask yourself, what do I need right now? And address that need with confidence and peace. So here we are, Sherilyn. There's the therefore what?
Two things through all of this. A couple of months ago, I love to ride my bike in Zion. It's one of my favorite things to do. And I had so much to do. And for some reason, I was able that day to just say, I don't care what I have to do. I'm going to go. And I cannot even begin to express that evening for me, the lighting in Zion, to be on my bike. It's something I still think about today. That one night where I really did take care of myself, and the benefit of that, not just that day, but the benefit of that feeling, even today, months later. It was a moment when it just mattered so much that I took the time to care for myself. So I want to do that more. That's one of my therefore what's, to just be more intentional, because I see so clearly the blessings and benefit of that. The other thing that you have mentioned to me that I can't stop thinking about either, you use the scriptural phrase for Mary, the mother of Jesus, that she came to herself. I've just loved that phrase ever since you've mentioned it to me, and I've thought about it a lot. This really is about coming to ourselves, isn't it?
Yeah.
And she's such an example of that in this phrase that she did. I believe that our Heavenly Father wants us to take care of ourselves so that we can show up and be our best self. And so I want to come to myself in greater ways. I'm more clear today because of our discussion on the blocks and what happens that prevents me from taking care of myself. And so that's my therefore what, those two things.
Oh, I love that, Sherilyn. I hope you will take that bike ride. I hope you'll do it. You deserve it. You do. I want to focus on this small scripture that has always stood out to me. I've wondered, why is that so striking? Initially, when I read it and really stopped on it, noticed it, I was thinking, why was that included in the scriptures? What is it about Mary came to herself? She experienced some pretty remarkable things in her young life. And to come to herself, to ponder on, what does this mean for me? Why me? Who am I? We can skim across the surface of life if we don't come to ourselves. So I think when we do that, we stop and we dive into a deeper sense of deeper thinking, deeper connecting, finding the richness of, if we skim across the top of life, memories are not wired in our brain, not in a rich sense. But if I could come to myself and consider, Mary did this, and what was it like for her? My therefore what is, I want to come to myself more, which I'm actually doing in the last few weeks. I've had this pause and reevaluation saying, what is most important? I need to come to myself and evaluate, what is that? And how can I make my journey better and more meaningful so that I can take care of others? So that's my therefore what. Was that too much, Sharilyn?
No, that's beautiful. I just want to add, Debbie, you are one of my greatest examples of self-care in so many ways. You really are. I've watched you. I've had the privilege of watching you even in the last few weeks come to yourself. Thanks for being a mentor to me on this topic specifically. You are great at this. So
Thank you. I hope our listeners know how much we love each other. I think you can tell. We have an amazing working relationship. So thank you for listening to us today. We so appreciate you, and share this with your friends and those that you think might benefit from it.
take care, everyone.